Long ago, letters were the only ways to communicate with loved ones when far apart. The beauty of a letter that I found from my parents inspired my deconstructive method of journaling for my Heirloom Envelopes collection. The envelope is your vessel where your journaling and memories will be kept forever. Instead of journaling in a traditional book, your journal will be your envelope where you can customize and alter in magical or simple ways. Bohemian Dreams, Oceans Apart, these are just a couple of the heirloom envelope styles that I have created, shown, and taught to so many of you. They are filled with my family heirlooms and stories. As the years go by, your envelope stack will continue to grow until you're left with the legacy of your life documented in an heirloom envelope. Whether you're using your heirloom envelopes to jot down your life's memories, or you're creating a beautiful envelope using the textiles and decorative elements that are heirlooms to yourself and your heritage, an heirloom envelope is a beautiful piece of art that will be treasured for years to come. So I pulled out a couple of pieces from my grandmother's sewing box, as well as some fabrics that I have placed into our fabric packs that we recently sold this weekend, and I'm going to be using them for my heirloom envelopes. These are just some of the treasures that I pulled out from my grandmother's sewing box. We're fortunate enough to have my grandmother's sewing box, and in there are some laces and some vintage buttons. This button is so old, it's actually warped in a different way. And the trims and fabrics are from the fabric pack as well as the little lace. And these other little elements are from her sewing box, and they go perfectly with the Valentine's Day colors and the colors of the envelope, so everything just goes so well together. Not only did I pull out some textiles and buttons and little trims, but I pulled out this from her sewing box also. She did embroidery, and these were some of her vintage embroidery patterns. And then over here in this little stack, I have papers, just scraps left over from the collection that I worked on. Some vintage papers to journal on. This is a tag made out of that piano paper that comes in a roll, and a lot of you guys really loved the piano paper, and you guys let me know on how the piano paper is used, so thank you so much for that. I'm going to show or dedicate a video just to this because a lot of you guys have this, and I think it's just such a beautiful gem to include in your journals and for your embellishments. It has so much history to it, and it should not be forgotten. It's something that shouldn't be forgotten, so it should be used in our journals. And just some more scraps of paper that I'm going to be using, as well as some little paper bobbins. So I made these little paper bobbins. The beauty of the heirloom envelope is that you create it with your hands. You transform a white envelope into something beautiful that speaks to you using heirloom pieces from your ancestry, from your family, from your heritage. That's what really steps the heirloom envelopes up and gives them more meaning when you see your pile of just heirloom lusciousness. To begin the process, I'm not going to be using this envelope to decorate, just because I already know that I'm going to be putting some pictures in here and just pictures, so I don't want to bulk it up too much. So this envelope is going to be on the side, and we're only going to focus on decorating these two envelopes right here. To start out decorating this envelope, the first thing is you need to see the size or the dimension of your envelope so that you know what will fit in it exactly. I'm going to be using my paper bobbins that I have created, and as you can see, there's 3 different sized paper bobbins, and the ones that have decorative elements to them, those are the ones that I'm just going to collage on top of them, add some fabric, add some papers, and on the larger one, the brown one, that's going to be my journaling space. So I'm taking some of my grandma's vintage embroidery patterns, such beautiful color, and I was fortunate that because they're naturally aged, the patina of the paper matches the music paper fairly well. I didn't have to distress it or anything. So I just cut it out, fuzzy cut it a little bit, and I glued it onto the music paper bobbin. And then I'm taking some of her lace, which is a really pretty floral design, And I'm trying to figure out if I want to add it on the very top or on the bottom, just kind of to add some dimension and make it a little bit cute. So I decided to cut around the flower, taking off the excess design, and this is the finished look of how I'm going to layer the paper bobbins. Really simple, not anything too difficult. Now I'm taking my pen to draw in a template for where I'm going to do some hand sewing, some hand embroidery. Very simple. It's probably the easiest thing to do, just taking some embroidery floss, putting it through a needle. Make sure you draw on your template if you're new to sewing onto paper. And you just tie a little knot at the end and you start embroidering your paper. I recommend piercing your needle through the holes first, so make sure on the template pierce it through the needle first so that when you go through to begin sewing, you already have those holes to use as a guideline. So I'm just going to continue to hand sew all of the little X's across the bottom of my paper bobbin until the whole thing is finished and filled up. And the one at the very end, you want to make sure you tie a little knot so that it doesn't come loose. And I just do a simple embroidery knot and then trim off the excess thread. And look at how cute it looks. Oh, it looks so adorable. And I love that I used 3 elements from my grandmother's sewing box: the vintage embroidery floss, some lace, and her embroidery patterns. Now I'm going through my little metal embellishments that I got from Hobby Lobby, I believe, and I'm just passing all of my different sized paper bobbins through it where I hole punched it, and it just kind of looks like a fun, interactive, and layered bobbin tag. So this is a close-up so that you can see the little mechanism behind it. Super simple, like I said. I just came back from thrift shopping with my mother. I had to take a quick little break because I completely forgot today was our thrift day. And I found the coolest thing at the thrift store. Look at this. It's a Fisker's paper crimper for $1.99. And I've always wanted a paper crimper. And I just think it's so cool. It is a little cumbersome, so I don't like the size of it, but it's completely brand new. Never used one before. Oh my gosh, that is so cool. You clamp it shut, and then you just pass it through. That is so cool. I've always wanted a paper crimper, and I just never bought it. It's like one of those things that you want, but you just don't see the need to have it right at this moment. But now that I have one, I'm going to use them in my projects, and they're perfect for mixed media. It feels so cool, and because this is handmade paper, it just has a nice texture to it. So now we have some crimped paper that we can use. All right, so let me go ahead and continue to journal in my heirloom envelopes, and let's see what I end up creating. Now that I have this fun new element to add to my heirloom envelopes, I have a little bit more fun with it, and I take it to a little bit more of a creative route. So I was originally just planning on layering the crumpled paper and that avocado paper for dimension and just to make a nice layered look. But now what I'm going to do is, since that crumpled paper has texture and it's sturdy, I'm going to take some of that embroidered trim that we sold in our fabric packets, and I'm going to make it into a little tuck spot. So just by simply passing it through the sewing machine, that'll be able to turn into a pocket. I'm going to be holding all these layered elements together by taking one of my grandmother's vintage buttons and some thread. And this is going to become the closure that's going to hold all of the paper bits and pieces together. I have just sewn that border trim to the paper on my sewing machine, and it created a nice firm little text spot where I will be including the avocado dyed papers for some journaling space, journaling on the piano tag, and then I'm going to wrap everything around with my vintage button closure. I adore this layered paper embellishment that I made using my grandmother's heirloom treasures and using some of my personal pieces and making something so beautiful that I'll be able to journal in a really interactive and fun way. So now moving on to the next envelope, I'm using some scrap papers from the journal collection, so putting a little bit of myself into my heirloom envelopes as well as with my grandma. I just love that harmonious relationship of two different things, papers, modern papers, and vintage textiles and buttons working together to form our harmonious combination. So I have decided to create a double pocket with my papers. Really simple, just pass it through the sewing machine so I can use up the most of the space that I have. And now I need to create some tags to go into those little pockets. It's very important to me to preserve the paper scraps that I use or that are left over when I create journals, because a lot of the time I use papers that are very special, or I purchase paper specially for that journal, and I feel horrible throwing them away. They're a little piece of me in that time that I took to make the journal. And for me, they're precious treasures. Even though it's scraps of paper, someone might look at them and think this is trash. For me, it's treasure. And it's even more meaningful because I used it to create my artwork that someone else will treasure for years to come. So I always save my scraps. I treasure my scraps from my collections, and I use them to create tags or other paper embellishments such as this. So I love creating tags this way. Great way to use up your scraps, and if your scraps have meaning to you, then it's the icing on the cake. So for the other little pocket, I'm just grabbing some vintage ledger and I'm cutting it to size so that it fits into that little pocket so I have extra journaling space. And as you can see, journaling in a deconstructive way truly is a lot of creativity. A lot of creativity is involved because you're working with a smaller space, not a traditional space. So you need to make the most of your pockets, your text spots, how you're going to journal, and look at things in a decorative way, but also a useful way as well. So I'm creating another tag using some of that crumpled paper. I can't get enough of it. You guys, I think it's going to be my next, favorite thing to use, especially because of the possibilities of, imagine distressing it or staining it. So now I'm using some of that vintage piano paper to glue it on. As you can see, it ripped apart in the middle. So this paper is very, very fragile, especially where it's perforated. So I suggest using the smallest scraps if you are going to collage, but if you're going to create it into a pocket, just be very careful with how you sew it. And I'm cutting off the excess because, like I said, this is going to be a tag, so I need to cut it in the shape of a tag and add my little hole so I can add some fabrics or some trims later on, making sure that they fit nicely into my double pocket embellishment. And the great thing is you have journaling space in the pockets on the tags and then on the back as well. And it just sits nice and firmly in my envelope, which is so cute. It's the best feeling when you make something beautiful and practical, and when it fits into your journal like a pocket or your envelope, it's a really great feeling. Let me know if you guys also feel that feeling of accomplishment when your stuff perfectly fits or you perfectly cut a piece of paper into the size that you needed it to be. So now I'm taking some more of my grandmother's heirlooms. Since this envelope, I didn't really do that much to it. Pretty much nothing, I think. I'm going to leave it just as it is so I can put pictures, but I wanted to include that wicked old button from my grandmother's sewing box, and I'm just cutting the excess threads. I like to always sew my buttons on instead of just add glue. They're more secure and they look a lot beautiful that way, and I just love the aesthetic of a button being hand sewn to your paper. So now moving on to my textiles, this is where I'm going to put a little bit of myself into my heirloom envelopes using the fabrics from, I believe it was the Christmas Jolly bundle that I sold a couple months ago, and then the fabrics from this previous journal packet or fabric packet. And I'm just roughly cutting them so that they look a little bit more authentic and not completely perfect, especially with this vintage style. I don't want it to look perfect. And I'm trying to see where it would best look more aesthetically pleasing. And I don't want to cover anything up that I have already put. And as you can see here, it would be too many fabrics just in one side. So I decided on the right side, since there's not really anything in the way, and my three elements where the button and the other fabrics are will be aesthetically more pleasing this way. So now that I figured out where I want my fabrics to go, I passed it through my sewing machine, and I'm going to glue it with some fabric glue right on top of my envelope. Since it's already made, I can't pass it through my sewing machine, so I just add a little bit more glue and it's perfectly held in place. Now it's time to put all of my envelopes and layer them all up together to see what else I can add, since the whole aesthetic of the heirloom envelopes is to package them up, stacked up one on top of the other, and ending up with this beautiful stack of heirloom lusciousness. So it's very important to see how you stack it up and how your decorative elements come through. So I felt like I needed a little bit more red on the left side of my envelopes, and so I'm just going to take my needle and my grandmother's vintage embroidery thread, and I'm just doing some messy sewing on that bit of cheesecloth and linen. It adds a beautiful, beautiful vintage look to it, and it adds texture and color, that little bit of red that I needed to finish up the stack. Sometimes all you need is to do a little bit of hand sewing and your piece comes together so effortlessly and so beautifully. And now I am grabbing one of my In My Heart crystal journal charms. I made one extra set for myself since I loved them so much. And I wanted to hang it from that snowflake lace on the side of the envelope to add a little bit more of myself into the heirloom envelopes. All of these, like you've seen, the fabrics, the buttons, my charms, they all have significance to me, to my family, and that's the main goal of the heirloom envelopes, to combine all of the special elements together. And I have tied it up with some leftover sari silk, and I thought there was something else missing, so I wanted to put perhaps a charm or a little piece of fabric in the middle of the bow. I wanted to put some fabric just kind of peeking through the sides of the envelopes just to give more layers and dimension. But it occurred to me that I haven't even used my grandmother's vintage wooden spool, and it was the perfect thing, like the cherry on top of the sundae, to finish up my stack of heirloom envelopes. So I tied it up, and the closure, the envelopes, the decorative elements are all done. So I truly hope that you guys enjoyed seeing how I alter my heirloom envelopes. If you're interested in taking the course, right now it's on discount because of Valentine's Day and because it is the 1-year anniversary. So I really hope you guys check out the course if you haven't already. I hope this video inspired you to reach for your heirloom pieces and create beautiful works of art in them. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you guys have an amazingly wonderful day wherever you are, with peace and love. Bye-bye.